All right, welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. Happy Friday. It is indeed. And thank you so much for joining us. My name is Christina Stanche, and I'm the director of the Humanities Research Center here at VCU. And I'm so glad you're here today for our fourth and last event in the series, in the HRC series of Research Fridays this semester. This is a new series of events dedicated to supporting ongoing research, mentoring, grant writing, and other interdisciplinary research and scholarly projects in the humanities, but also across the university. So far, we've held 3 very well-attended events in September and October, a grant writing workshop for humanities scholars, a research presentation with the 2019-2020 HRC residential fellows, and the workshop on mentoring underrepresented faculty a couple of weeks ago. Today, I'm very delighted to welcome to the HRC Ms. Ebony Walden and Dr. Meghan Gough, who have kindly agreed to share with us their recent community project called Richmond Racial Equity Essays. I will introduce both of them briefly, and after their presentation, we will have time for questions and answers. And, you know, most of you are familiar with our structure as the speakers present. Please post your questions in the Q&A function, and then we'll attempt to answer them in the order in which they are received. And our speakers will take about 40-45 minutes. It's my pleasure to introduce Ms. Ebony Walden, who is an urban planner and consultant who leverages her experience to design and facilitate racial equity training, strategy, and community engagement processes that explore race, equity, and inclusion in cities. Walden is the principal consultant at Ebony Walden Consulting, an urban strategy firm based here in Richmond. And she's also an adjunct professor in the Douglas Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs here at VCU. Welcome, Ebony. And our second presenter is Dr. Meghan Gough, whom I met several years ago, many years ago, should I say, when we were both faculty fellows in the provost's office and worked under the leadership of Dr. Kathy Bassard and Dr. Lynn Pelko, who is also here in the audience today. Welcome, Dr. Pelko. So Dr. Meghan Gough is an associate professor of urban and regional studies and planning in the VCU Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs. Her work emphasizes civic capacity building and planning for more livable and equitable communities. Meghan's contributions to research help to elevate the importance of community-based decision-making and partnerships in the development of plans and policies to support sustainable community development. It is my pleasure to welcome both of you to this HRC Research Friday event to share with the audience your recent exciting project that I can't wait to hear more about, Richmond Racial Equity Essays.
Thank you, Christina, and thank you everybody who is attending. So happy to be here to share our exciting work and project, and I will share my screen to get us going. As was stated, the project is named Richmond Racial Equity Essays, and with the goal of thinking about dismantling, and coming up with the ideas and solutions and to dismantle racism and reimagine our beloved city and region of Richmond. So the Richmond Racial Equity Essays is a multimedia project focused on advancing racial equity in Richmond. We essentially asked 50 people from all walks of life and from different sectors, from academic to activists, what their vision for racial equity is and how is it that we get there. That has managed those questions or responses to that questions. The question of what your vision for racial equity is and how do we get there has manifested in 3 different ways. We have an ebook of 24 essays written by 27 essayists. So there's a number of folks that co-authored. There is a video series, which is, we interviewed 7 folks, all different walks of life around Richmond, and asked those same questions. And then there's an 8-episode podcast where I interviewed about 15 people asking the same group of questions. And the whole point was to really generate ideas and solutions to deepen our understanding, not only of the myriad of ways in which systemic racism shows up in our city, across sector, but to really generate solutions around it. The project was inspired and modeled after the Just City Essays, which was an ebook that was put together by urban planner extraordinaire Tony Griffin was one of the editors. It was published by Next City and the Nature of Cities. That was about 5 years ago. And basically they put out a call from all over the world to urban planners and urbanists, everything from mayors to city planners to artists to academic and community advocates and organizers, and asked the question, what is a just city and how do we get there? And so I kind of came up with the idea. A lot of my work, I'm an urban planner, but also I do DEI work, or diversity, equity, and inclusion work. And I like to say my work operates at the intersection of race and place. So in lots of different rooms where people are talking about equity, but wasn't really sure that people really talking about how we move forward and move towards racial equity. So now, even though this project was conceived about 2 years ago, it seemed to be absolutely the right time with our increased heightened awareness around race and injustice, but also in just our racial awareness and I think the will to do something about it. And I think why here Richmond is, it's like the monuments are down, now what? Right? What is it that we're going to do? We're the former capital of the Confederacy. Can we be the capital of something else? And I'm hoping that, I think Meghan and I and all the folks involved are hoping that could be the capital of racial equity, that we can actually be a model for how to move towards advancing racial equity as a city, across sector, through conversation and partnership. So our purpose was really to promote public dialogue, thought leadership, and collective action. Because I'm a practitioner, I'm really interested in getting the ideas from people that are doing the work and have done the work for a number of years. I come across so many brilliant people in Richmond and just wanted to give them a platform to share their work and the solutions that are already being implemented throughout our city, and to highlight those things as models, not just here in Richmond, but this as a conversation model for how we can advance racial equity across the region, and across the country, because these are problems that are not just going to be solved by one group of people or one type of group of people. So that was a goal. The curators are myself, and then I drafted Meghan in, and she wanted to assist in the project and helping me co-edit the essay ebook. And then Duran Chavis is an urban farmer and activist that is the videographer for the project. Meghan, did you just want to say a little bit about how you got drafted in and kind of why you joined this project?
Sure, thank you. So I was, when Ebony invited me to be part of this project, I was excited about it because it really linked well with my work in community engaged research and teaching, and specifically thinking about how to elevate storytelling at the community level and, our broad community. And to really think about the power of storytelling as a tool for engagement, for cross-community education, for mobilization, and the possibility of it. So I was really interested in helping to support these narratives and think about how these narratives could help kind of shape our way of thinking and of racial equity, and challenge us to imagine that the examples and the ways in which we might see racial justice or injustice show up in a community is going to be different from the person right next to us and right next to us. So I was very excited to help elevate and amplify these community voices and illustrations of racial justice and injustices.
Thanks, Meghan. And Meghan and Duran and I have known each other for a while, and they've worked together on different projects, and Duran and I have worked together on different projects. So Duran heard what I was doing and said he had just finished Black Space Matters, which is a video series that he did in combination with the exhibit that was outside at the ICA, and said, I have video, I would love to add the elements of video, right? And that was really to make it more accessible to folks around, I'm a bookworm, I read essays, I read books. Not everybody does. And we wanted to make this project accessible to anybody in Richmond that would be interested in pursuing racial justice and social justice and learning more about the ways in which the injustices manifest in our community. So then we move forward with how do we actually get people to be a part of the process? And so Duran was really adamant about it not being a competition, but that it really be a curated list of people. So all three of us came together with about 30 names of people we knew who either could write essays or knew we trusted their ability to help us generate a list of people that could be part of the process, right? So we created a simple Google form and said, would you be interested in writing an essay or be in a video? If so, what would you talk about in your essay? And then, do you know other people that you could nominate that you think would be interested in writing an essay, has a perspective, has a particular expertise that can really be brought in this conversation? So with that, we probably got between, I think, at least 125 up to 150 nominations, which was absolutely crazy and bananas. And we nailed it down or got it down to about 29 folks. And we basically chose based on, we wanted diversity. So we wanted age diversity, we wanted race diversity, we wanted gender diversity, we wanted different diversity of perspective, of expertise. Like, we didn't want everybody to write about housing. We didn't want everybody to write about the environment or economics. We also wanted people from different positional diversity. So some grassroots folks, some advocates folks, a couple of academics, so all different perspective and walks of life to create this kind of dynamic and diverse vision collectively together. And again, we asked people, what's your vision for racially equitable Richmond and how do we get there? It was really important for us to explore what their vision is from their perspective and expertise and grounded in their story, but also to give us solutions, right? So we weren't just interested in just exploring these ideas, but wanted to say, if you have your 50 or however 1,500 words of fame, what then should we do, right? What are the solutions? What are the strategies that you would suggest we employ, either individually or as institutions or as a region, in order to move towards the vision that you've set out? These are the 27 essayists that were part of the collection. They ranged from in their 20s to in their 80s. As you can see, the racial diversity, everything from activists to teachers to academics to pastors to radio hosts and everything in between that are part. You'll see some who's who faces as part of our city, but you'll also probably see some new faces and new voices that were important to the project. They're the ones that said yes, and they were able to commit their time and energy to write between 1,500 and 2,000 word essays from their particular expertise and perspective. And the topics we put them into 7 categories. So there is planning for inclusive communities that focus on really urban planning, affordable housing, educational equity, economic development, power shifting and partnerships, community healing and justice, and building healthy communities were the 7 categories that the essayists kind of fit in the ebook. So I will turn it over to Meghan to talk a little bit more about the editing process.
So the process was central to this whole project. We wanted to find ways to support these authors, some of whom had done a lot of writing, and this was second nature, but many of whom did not. And so we provided an instruction manual with lots of kind of do's and don'ts for this type of writing. Ebony just mentioned that we had the requirement that the essay be centered around these 2 broad questions, like what's your vision and what are the strategies. And so, we provided suggestions like, have a good opener to the story. What's your main argument? Be clear. And while 2,000 words might sound like a lot, when we're wrestling with some of these big issues and observations, it actually isn't. So trying to be concise. So we created spaces for them as well to workshop their drafts. They could have virtual or one-on-one meetings with us. I know some authors shared it with a lot of other people, you know, so it was kind of a community effort to review and hone and sort of allow these authors, and I can speak for myself too, as an author, is work through this, right? These are things that we've been thinking about for a while, but to have the opportunity to get it out there and challenge ourselves to put actions to it. Like, what is the call to action? And so one of the most important piece that we found is that essays were really effective when authors use their own personal stories as a foundation, to use that as a launching point to talk about these perspectives and experiences. And ultimately, all of this went into the process to help these authors use the essays as a thought leadership vehicle. And it was, as Ebony said, there were times where it felt like bananas. It was a lot, but all the authors really just showed up and put themselves into it. So it was a really rewarding process as well. So we were encouraged to read parts of our essays. So I'm going to read a section of my essay. Ebony will do the same, and then we'll share some of one of the videos. And so here we go. So my essay is titled Reparative and Equitable Practices and Partnerships. My vision of a racially equitable Richmond is one in which resourced institutions such as higher education invest in reparative and equitable practices that respect lived experiences and are built on partnerships. As a society, we value expertise. Expertise is the skill or knowledge that emerges from experience, training, or study, and it's critical to addressing complex societal concerns because it helps us understand, question, evaluate, and innovate. Who we consider or see as quote unquote experts matters because it represents the perspectives we value. It informs how we see our roles in addressing community challenges. Trained experts, including academics, have knowledge, tools, and resources to address complicated issues. But context experts are the people with the lived experience of the situation. These experts live in the places, deal with the challenges, and are really already working towards solutions. The problem is when we systematically elevate trained expertise, gained through credentials over lived expertise. I felt tension between trained expertise and lived expertise for the first time after Hurricane Katrina ravaged the Gulf Coast in 2005. This natural disaster motivated the most renowned firms to provide weeks of pro bono design assistance for many communities. The hurricane literally left a clean slate in many areas, so designers established a new physical vision. Working class communities were transformed on paper through renderings of beautiful mixed-use corridors and residential areas with a new aesthetic common to coastal vacation towns. On its face, these designs were an incredible offering to the Gulf Coast communities, which had limited capacity to plan post-disaster. But there was more to that story. I was a city planning graduate student when Katrina made landfall and was part of a university team providing technical planning assistance in Mississippi. My team felt the resistance from that initial planning and design work and observed that the experience left communities skeptical about planners and designers from outside their communities. So much of the designs were inappropriate because the firms were not from or familiar with the Gulf Coast and did not incorporate local and lived knowledge about the history, the culture, or the physical characteristics of the region. Most residents were displaced by the hurricane to other cities, so only those with considerable resources to return to this planning event could participate in the charrettes and the public meetings. In the end, none of the design schemes developed by those out-of-state firms were implemented. Local residents and officials simply called them pretty pictures, beautiful renderings of wealthy coastal communities, which was not their community. Despite all the classroom learning, this was where I learned that those with degrees and certifications are not the only or even the primary experts in community planning and decision-making. Little did I know then that I would spend my career as a university professor continuing to wrestle with this tension between trained expertise and lived expertise in my teaching and research. I accepted a faculty position in Urban and Regional Planning and Studies at VCU in the L. Douglas Wilder School of Government and Public Affairs, primarily because VCU was one of the few public research universities that was also classified as community engaged, which means that community engagement is institutionalized into the university's mission, identity, and commitments. VCU was a national leader in community engagement and had built infrastructure under leadership of Lynn Pelko and Kathy Howard to support the development of responsible community university partnerships. VCU, like other public research universities, was established with a civic mission to develop knowledge that could enhance the economic and social conditions in communities and prepare students to play an active role in a diverse democratic society. Despite university efforts, many lack the infrastructure required to build mutually beneficial community partnerships that also result in tangible benefits for the surrounding residents. It's time for higher education to renew its civic mission and to do the hard work of self-reflection. How are we teaching students to understand and play active societal roles towards racial justice? Are we succeeding in developing mutually beneficial and non-paternalistic partnerships with communities? As a white female academic working in a large urban public research university in Richmond, Virginia, I regularly critique my role and responsibility as a researcher and teacher, training mostly white city planning students to work and serve mostly Black communities. Although racial and ethnic diversity has increased among university professors, there's still an imbalance between faculty and students. And as a profession, planning is still exceedingly white, raising the importance of assessing the role of whiteness in planning education and what that means for how we have been advocating, teaching, engaging, and planning for equitable cities. Last paragraph. My dual role as a professor and planner accentuate the importance of problematizing the profession's history of swooping in to initiate, fix, or otherwise address community issues without first understanding the community context and engaging with lived expertise. Co-production of knowledge and humility need to be a critical part of shifting planning's approach to power. As we rethink our roles and responsibilities, we should invest in reparative and equitable planning practices that include, one, acknowledging structural racism as a societal problem, two, prioritizing lived experiences and expertise, and three, building long-term and mutually beneficial partnerships.
Thanks, Meghan. And I also put a link to Meghan's essay in the chat. And then I'll read a little bit of mine, but if you want to follow along, I won't read the whole thing. This is my essay. So my essay talked about how do we have Black and Brown centered placemaking that's rooted in identity and ownership. Growing up, I was considered disadvantaged because I lived in a single parent household where we struggled to make ends meet, and I was enrolled in a low performing school district. In order to flip my disadvantaged status on its head, I strove to become the epitome of excellence by graduating at the top of my class and going off to Georgetown University. Now, years later, as a successful Black entrepreneur who beat the odds, I am considered an exception. I, however, am not satisfied being an anomaly. Even under the worst oppression, there were some Black people who were successful. But what if we had a system that encouraged Black and Brown prosperity as the norm? What if we had a system that valued and invested in it and removed the greatest barriers to it, systemic racism and economic inequality, both of which feed into each other? What if we had neighborhoods and communities that displayed, supported, and celebrated Black and Brown prosperity, rooted in property and business ownership and a robust cultural identity? I went into urban planning because I wanted to create these types of communities where Black and Brown prosperity was written into the landscape. I wanted to see more Black and Brown communities with renovated buildings, grocery stores selling healthy food, quality housing, and successful businesses and commercial buildings owned by the people who live in those neighborhoods. Neighborhoods where Black and brown presence and cultures were celebrated, not just signs of degradation. This is still my hope, to help create a racially equitable Richmond that is absent of starkly visible differences in streets and streetscapes, parks, housing, services, schools, and business districts between the mostly Black and brown communities in the East End, North Side, and South Side, and those in the West End, which tend to be wealthier and whiter. To do this, we must intentionally acknowledge and address the racial inequities that have become the norm in our community. Data outlined in Richmond 300, the city's master plan, and RBA Green 2050, the city's climate resilience planning process, show that wealth, health, school performance, housing, and home ownership, as well as environmental disparities, are racial, economic, and geographic. The neighborhoods that are not thriving are Black and brown, and in certain sections of our city. We have to be diligent and vigilant in unmasking and disrupting white supremacy in the ways it has shaped our urban environment. We know the history of redlining, highway construction through neighborhoods such as Jackson Ward, concentrating public housing, and how Black and brown communities were targeted for subprime lending and experienced the greatest impact on wealth, foreclosures, and home ownership from the Great Recession. Black wealth is at an all-time low. We have lost 3,600 Black homeowners in Richmond, and our city is gentrifying. We are far from the one Richmond that the mayor touts. We are, like most places, a tale of two cities, one prospering and white, the other mostly struggling in Black and brown. I am not sure that what we need is unity. We need to be comfortable with difference, celebrate diversity, make sure those who are marginalized are at the table and have power, and work to upend disparities that have for too long been associated with our differences. My equitable Richmond includes thriving Black and brown communities centered on celebrating cultural identity and ownership in intentional neighborhood-centric ways. We can do that by creating communities rooted in this identity, Black and brown identity in excellence. We may not be initially aware of it, but we have created spaces and institutions that cater to and reflect whiteness. What if we also intentionally created Black spaces and other cultural spaces that reflected the broad diversity of our community? When I travel, there is a natural draw by locals and tourists alike to Chinatowns and Little Italy's Koreatowns or other neighborhoods rooted in specific identities and cultures, but are also welcoming and attractive to visitors and residents of all types. What if Richmond had the 21st century equivalent to a Jackson Ward at its height, representative of Black prosperity? What if we uplifted Latino businesses and culture in the South Side and in our placemaking? These things will make our city rich and attractive to visitors, but also more home to those people who live here. We need to make sure that the 50% of the Black and brown people that live in Richmond can stay here and can call it home. We also need to support Black and brown ownership and entrepreneurship. We know the key to prosperity in this country is wealth creation, which is connected to ownership of land, of capital, and the capacity to leverage resources. Thus, in order to catalyze communities of color in this generation and the next, we should focus on ownership of these resources. A more equitable Richmond would increase the ownership opportunities, as well as business ownership and entrepreneurship of Black and brown folks in the city. Places like Evansville, Illinois, and Asheville, North Carolina have created home ownership programs for Black residents that give them grants, right? So that these are programs that are established by focusing on redressing the harms of urban renewal programs in the 50s through the 70s. Business programs that support property ownership will be key also to stabilizing Black businesses, which equates to ownership and growth and wealth. This emphasis on supporting Black and brown-centered identity, community building, and ownership opportunities may seem extreme, but what we have experienced for the past 400 years is privileging and centering whiteness in both our racist and race-neutral policies, from federal to local policies to the private market. To counteract this legacy, we need to work harder to invest in marginalized communities of colors from a placemaking, neighborhood planning, and economic development perspective. We must start now unmasking racism in ourselves, our communities, and institution, and unlearning its ways and tricks, and being midwives to the new equitable Richmond that is waiting to be born. So that's a bit of an excerpt from my essay. I hope you enjoyed it. And then we'll switch over now to sharing the video before we start our Q&A. So as both Meghan and I said, the videos were in addition. We first started off with essays to really broaden the voices beyond the written essays. We have 7 short videos curated by Deron Chavis, which is community activist in our, that I think this is his second series, right? He did Black Space Matters with the ICA. This is his second series. And so we want to show you one of those videos. All of them are about 10 to 12 minutes each, except we interviewed the mayor and Ellen Robertson, who's one of the longest serving city councilors. That's a little bit long because it's a 2-person interview. So here's an example. This is Don Coleman, a local pastor, native Richmonder, who has been doing work around social justice and race for the past 30 years. Both he and his daughter were part of the project. His daughter is an urban planner and graduate from BCU, and this is Don Coleman.
Well, I'm Don Coleman. I'm the pastor of the East End Fellowship, located here in the East End of Richmond. What came to me was actually way back when I was in middle school. There was an incident that happened. They had integrated the schools, and so they bused in kids from the South Side, blacks and actually whites from the South Side into the East End. And I was in the 7th grade, and I was out on the playground, and we were in a PE class, and we were doing softball at that time. The instructor had told us, if you're not up to bat, stay behind the fence. But I didn't. I walked out there just playing around, and a white guy named Donald also swung the bat, and wow, burst my head open, blood everywhere. I ended up having to go to the hospital, get stitches. I came back to school the next day, and all my black friends were coming up to me saying, hey, man, we gonna take care of that dude, man, for hitting you with that bat. We gonna take care of it. And I was like, well, wait a minute. Actually, he's my friend. And so my black, what? The white guy is your friend? And when I look back over my life, that was the beginning of me, you know, wanting to be a change agent, really wanting to, especially around racial equity, seeing that, you know, we got to figure out how we all going to be able to work together. And again, that's been my story over these several years here. And again, one of the primary things I've done is with my local church. When we started the church, it was Black and white people together in Churchill, which was fairly confounded because gentrification was happening. But people were coming here that were different. And I recognize that as a lifelong resident of the East End, again, it's happening, but we got to try to do that with equity. So that's how I got involved with this type of work of just seeing people working together and seeing people of color absolutely empowered. Well, I really feel like the whole situation around education, specifically the public schools, not having the resources that they need to make sure that all students get the quality of education that they need. Spent a couple of years, several years on the school board trying to fight for that because I just think it's critical. Education is just critical to a young person having an opportunity to find success. So that's my first one. But the second one would be around this whole, the wealth gap and how do we attack that? And primarily, all the data shows the number one way to do that for people to build wealth is through home ownership. And we know with the story of redlining and all the foolishness that has happened in Richmond, we got to do something to expedite Blacks having access to be able to start to build wealth, and home ownership is that. So of course, affordable housing fits into that. Well, for me, for the city of Richmond to be equitable, one of the picture, when we talk about pictures, I would talk about, again, multi-ethnic, diverse neighborhoods where people from all ethnicities are living together in harmony. And the other thing I like would be that the schools actually would be the hub of the neighborhood, that people would actually go to the schools in their neighborhood, support them. They would be community centers that draw people together. And then, of course, I would have loved to see parks. Again, when you show up at a park, everybody's there. It's not like, oh, well, this is where all those people go. This is where no, it's everybody there. So, it's real simple, but that's the way I see it. Is people, diverse people being together, full of joy, and recognizing that we can all love this place together, despite the former history. We can make a new Richmond. That's my dream. Here's my first thing. In order for us to see that vision of a multi-ethnic neighborhoods and all that come to pass, those of us who live in segregated neighborhoods, whether they be all white or all Black, have got to be intentional about having and building relationships cross-culturally with people who don't look like, with people who don't come from the same economic status that I come from. I think there has to be a greater level of intentionality. And of course, my perspective, I feel like those with wealth are the ones with the greater responsibility to make sure they're being intentional about humbling themselves and learning about people in other neighborhoods and communities. That's how this comes together, because the problem is that those who can choose to not be a part of helping, that's the power they have. They choose not to be a part. And for Richmond to change, those who have the power to choose have to choose to humble themselves and engage the entire community. And here in the East End is a primary place where we got to see that happen. Because here we have public housing, but now we have gentrification, multiple apartments coming up. But do the people moving in care about the people who've been here before? Do they know their stories? Do they seek out the stories of people who've lived here for a while? Again, to be a part of building one community. I'm 60 years old. And one of the things, because we see today all of this fresh talking about racial equity, my reality is I've been working at it for a while. But the Ahmaud Arbery situation is the one that in this past year that really awakened me. There was a picture that they used of Ahmaud Arbery with him in his high school graduation, kind of like tuxedo with the bow tie, dark skin like me, kind of got my kind of smile. And I looked at it and I said, we're still dealing with this? When I graduated high school in 1979, and we're still dealing with this. And so what I did, I also joined the fray and embarked on, I've had over 50 conversations here on my porch, predominantly with white males, to talk about why does this continue? And to really challenge them. And of course, I'm a Christian, so a lot of it was around our faith also, but to really challenge them that the reason this is arising is because young people are done. They're not going to end up like me, that in 1979, when I graduated, we were talking about it. And here we are in 2021, still talking about it. Young people have decided that is not going to be the case for their children. And I'm excited about that. I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged that I believe finally a reckoning is happening where we must. And once again, those with the most power are the ones who will have to choose to humble themselves and join in the conversation and be willing to listen, learn, and change. That's what I think about all this.
So those are just a couple of snippets from our projects, our essays, the process. We had last week an event at the ICA, both kind of just a little teaser that like we gave you all of essays and videos, as well as a panel. So both highlighting the ideas that came about in the essays and the myriad of ideas, but also continuing the conversation with a panel that focused on what the role is in advancing racial equity. We've also been able to kind of get the word out about the project. So it's been written up quite a bit in local news, as well as some of the essays have been republished in other kind of national news outlets like Next City, which is a media outlet that just talks about equity in cities. So they put in a couple, and then Greater Washington, which is in the DC area, is also put in a couple. So the goal kind of in my mind now is to really to get the word out for people to read, see, watch, and ingest these ideas, as well as be open to what the emerging next steps and impact will be. So that's all we got. Meghan, did you want to say anything before we opened it up for questions?
Just thanks for this opportunity. We, a couple of people have asked in the chat and in the Q&A, what's next, and where we might see this going. And I just think that this is one of the goals at the very beginning of this was to elevate these ideas and cultivate more collective action. And I think we've seen evidence of this so far, and we're really excited to see where this goes from here. Certainly the goal is not to have these essays read and then stop. We're really hoping that people resonate with these essays and take up some of the strategies that are offered. Every essay has a list of strategies at the end of it. Every section in the essays has a summary of the actions that others can help launch. Look for partnerships, look for opportunities. Where can your organization or you personally participate in some of these efforts, big or small? So thank you.
Thank you both so much. It was a fantastic presentation and fantastic project. I love the birds chirping when Coleman was speaking. That was such a nice touch, which you can only capture through video and sound, right? No printed material can render that. So we'll go to questions next. I know they've been coming in the Q&A, and we invite you to continue posting them. And if you'd like to ask a question live, that's also possible. Just raise your hand and we will invite you in. A question that sort of builds on Meghan's question I had for you too, especially after hearing snippets from Meghan's essay on our own institutional context and the role of storytelling. I'm an English professor, so I love storytelling. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how VCU faculty and staff members can incorporate some of these materials into their own teaching, be intentional about that. And, maybe that generates a wider conversation across campus. As I was watching the beautiful images of all the 27 people involved in this project, I also noticed the face of Reverend Campbell, and we had him here at the HRC on Monday. The History and Health Racial Equity Series event had a wonderful 1 hour and a half, very well attended event on fundamentals of race and racism. So it's very good to see how things are beginning to come together.
Yeah, but there's so much opportunity to use these essays. I know faculty members that are already using them in their class. As soon as it was released, they added it to the syllabus or brought it up in their classrooms. Ebony and I were just giving a guest lecture in a class this week. So bringing in not only introducing the topics, but wrestling with some of the ideas in there. So the hope is that, so Don Coleman's essay or his video essay just now, one of the things that strikes me about his essay is he says, young people are done with this, right? And every time we get to that part of his essay, I get chills because, well, he's a wonderful speaker, but also I see opportunity and I see organizing, and I do see resistance in young people to continuing these unjust trends, patterns, systems in our communities. And so VCU and other students are ripe for this, including specific essays in classes. I mean, if you look at the different essays and you look at the different people that are presenting it, they come from so many different sectors, so many different areas, and there's going to be something relevant for different classes. One thing that I've done with Tony Griffin's Just City essays, which this is modeled after in the past, is I let students pick an essay. What essay resonates with you and why? And so I think these essays present the same opportunity. Give students choices. Maybe have them pick an essay that challenges them in a way and reflect on that. I think these essays provide so much opportunity specifically for challenging viewpoints, challenging experiences. And I think it's our responsibility as educators to provide that opportunity and to create the spaces to feel uncomfortable and work through them.
Thanks, Meghan. Yeah, go ahead.
I was just going to say, in my world, I work in kind of both worlds actually, but I've also said a number of the speakers will be in my class. So my class is on diversity, equity, and inclusion in the city. And so having students read the essays, I think that anybody who wants to learn more about the ways in which race and racism manifest in our society will learn something from these essays, right? So me and Meghan had to sit down and read, and I was like, well, I'm in the urban planning space, right? So the reading about the education space is really important to me. So it support anybody's learning. But even my clients who are primarily nonprofit organizations that are trying to do this work have taken the essays and created their own discussion around them, own curriculum around them, right? And so that begs the question of, is there some structured way that we can kind of support? Because there are really groupings of talking, whether it's housing, whether it's education, whether it's our criminal justice system, whether it's art, all of these things kind of hit upon in the essays. And so I think my goal is to have people read them and use them as you would if you were publishing an article or writing a book. The goal number one is to have people read it so you can spread your ideas, and then so people can be inspired to do what it is that they are called to do and to be and to give in the world, right? And so much of this is releasing into the universe and to see what comes from it, and hopefully people will be changed and transformed just like I was by reading the Just City essays and inspired to do their own thing. Another thing is, like, I think this is a model for conversation and idea generation from various perspectives for other cities, right? So I would love for other cities to say, we want to do our whatever city essays and have a conversation around it and continue the conversation as well.
Yeah, that's terrific. Meredith Dash has asked quite a few questions. Sorry, we didn't have a chance to get to them, but we're going to start with the ones you guys have not answered yet in the chat. So I see a question about needing special permission. Do people need special permission to use the content in future grant proposals or with audiences? And she also says, I see a way that we could repeat this model with students. Were any authors considered that were teens? So I think she's referring to this particular group.
So to read the essays or to use the concepts, absolutely not. To publish them somewhere, so we have license to use and share the essays, and then the essayists, right? So this is somebody's work and content. So the similar way that you would use it, either citing it or asking if you're going to publish the full one, either their permission or our permission, if you're going to use the full essay, but you would just cite it as you would any other works that you're going to be referencing or using.
I'd say that we're also working to get these published on VCU's Scholars Compass. So very soon there should be, a permanent link to these essays and to the videos. So that would be a good reference point to cite some of the work.
Mm-hmm. And connected to that, another question is there a plan to do a second set of essays? And will this project continue in any of its forms and platforms?
Oh, that remains to be seen. This was an incredible amount of work that launched 1 month ago. So the last thing I'm thinking about is part 2. I don't know how Meghan feels about that. There's a possibility somebody would have to pay me. This was a labor of love. Somebody would have to, there'd have to be some extra incentive to do a part 2, to be quite honest, because it was a lot of work and took a good amount of funding, and I have a day job, right? So I think that is not out of the realm of possibility. What I do want to do is season 2 of the podcast. That was easy, simple, very accessible way for people. Volume 2 of the essays, I'm sure we'd be open to it. That's not necessarily planned. My goal is to rest in the work that has already been done and completed a month ago, and give myself a breather. And then who knows what I'm of the mind that the opportunities for next steps will emerge by you putting it out there in the universe. And then people that are excited about it will say, hey, I want to fund volume 2, or have you thought about this? And those things are already emerging. So I am fully confident that the conversation will continue. We had an event at the ICA on Friday, and they loved the essayists reading their essays, and they said, oh, let's do a round 2 that's just focused on essayists reading their essays. And so those are the types of things I want to be responding to, as opposed to dictating how this moves in the world. Because if I dictate, then I have to control, and I'm not really interested in that. I'm really interested in, like a TED Talk would be, your idea spreading, that really parlaying into other conversations and opportunities, not only for myself and Meghan, but opportunities to create a platform for 50 people, right? So these are everyday people doing work. They don't like submit articles or op-eds. So it's already given a number of the essayists kind of a platform for their work. We've had a number of publications republish their work, and hopefully they can use this to publish in other places to really up their own thought leadership. And so I love that as a way to say we need to create more platforms for everyday people out there doing the work to share their ideas. So however that manifests, I think I'd be open to that, and then open to, somebody else taking their spin and inspiration on it as well.
Let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges that went into producing this. And I know there was a question on the funding model, and, would you be interested in new partners, or will you seeking grant funding to support the continuation of the project? For those of us who are in the humanities and who are not doing this type of work, what can we learn from your experience, right? What were some of the challenges involved in the planning? I know you're urban planner, so that's another side of the project. But what are some of the main takeaways that folks interested in doing this kind of work in other discipline can incorporate into their own work, similar work?
I would say one of the most crucial parts is finding good partners. So Ebony's really organized. And that this is something that I love about working with her. She's organized, and she has a high level of persevering spirit. So there was confidence that this was going to happen, even in the times where it felt like we were working on this for a year, which we pretty much were. So I think finding the right partners, recognizing that you're working with people, as in like the other authors. So that multiplies all the complications. People are the interesting part, but that's how things kind of get a little bit crazy. But in order to manage that, I mean, there were so many structures in terms of like just even the instructions for how to do the essay, opportunities to link in with us or each other. I think being organized in that way was really helpful. But honestly, I think the people that were part of this process had a passion, and they were going to be dedicated to this project as well. So it wasn't, it wasn't something that the authors kind of said, yeah, sure, maybe I'll do this. They had something to say. And so I think that was really important to facilitate the project. Ebony?
I would say, and this is the importance of social capital, I think would not have happened without social capital, right? And so social capital this is actually probably like a $50,000 project that we did on 15, right? And primarily me going out and asking people that I knew to believe in the vision, right? And if they didn't, they believed in me more than they believed in the vision, but I also believed in me. And so it was always, I'm of the thing is that whatever's going to come to me is going to come to me, and I don't have to beg, right? And so it was always an invitation. This is going to happen. It's a great idea. Do you want to be a part of it? And I knew from my standpoint, I got sponsorships because I didn't have the time. I didn't have a nonprofit. I didn't have time to go through grant cycles and grant funding and to convince somebody that this is a good idea. So I asked a couple of people, this is our sponsorship. This is the project. This is why it would be important. And I had relationships in all of those places. So I think they just said yes to me because they knew me and was like, okay, I believe in you. And I'm glad they took a chance because of that. And then obviously they were people that supported racial equity. And so I think that social capital is being the jumping off point. It's also why people were able to write essays in addition to their passion of like, it's different from, half of these folks, Meghan and I know, and I'm like, can you write an essay? And they're like, absolutely, we're going to write an essay for y'all and for our city. But I think the combination of those things, knowing people and building your relationships, as well as all of the people we interviewed and people that showed up for the podcast, either I knew them or one of us knew them, or they were friends of friends. And so I think that being a person that is out and amongst the community helps things like this. Like even the ICA, it's a parlay from a connection that Duran had who kind of brought that social capital to bear. I do not think that this would have been worked if I would have purely went after grant funding or if I were to purely cold called people and written essays. So I think use your networks and know like the strength and limitations of that to harness that into something, right? And so the funding model was like, I need this amount of money. Can you do between a $1,000 and $10,000 sponsorship for this project? You'll get your logo on this, like you would do a conference sponsorship. We got Virginia Community Voice, which is I am on the board of, but there's also their mission is racial equity. So that created synergy for them. So it wasn't like outside of mission. They took all of the donations and kind of our fiscal agent or sponsorship. So that was pretty important as well. So I could go out and get money and it had a place to go and I didn't have to worry about all those things. So they were incredibly generous with that. And then getting the word out is really kind of using the partners, right? So I would say social capital, having a clear vision and product and really having people that believe in you and your vision and want to invest in it. And I always say it's an invitation. So if somebody says no, that is perfectly fine. You missed the boat and I'm going to go on to somebody else because I know this is ultimately a good idea. And I think that attracts good energy, right? Of yes, like somebody's going to say yes, not from a confident standpoint of being confident in your own vision and in your own voice. So I think that also helped as well.
Wonderful. We are out of time. We've been out of time for a while. I just wanted to convey Dr. Faye Belgrave's thanks. Great presentation. Thank you for sharing this resource. And maybe there is this is coming from me. Maybe there's room for future partnerships with the university on this project. So let us know how we can support you. Congratulations on this terrific project. There's also a social media account and link people can check out. And if they want to invite you to their classes, they can do that, right? That's an option. I'm so grateful to you and everyone involved in the project for sharing this research with us and this resource. And many thanks to all of you joining us today. It's a beautiful Friday afternoon, or at least it was before we started. I just want to end by saying that our next Research Friday event will be in February. So we are done for the semester, and what a wonderful way to end the semester with this terrific project. If you'd like to propose a Research Friday event for the spring semester, please reach out to me. And also, please check out our speaker series. As you know, Ebony and Meghan know, at the HRC this year, we are organizing our themes, our presentations around the theme race, ethnicity, and social justice. So this is a perfect fit, and I hope we continue this work, not just through presentations, but also through work in the community. I really liked Ebony's point about, this is a story of two Richmonds. And this is something we who have lived here for a while continue to grapple with. So please check out our speaker series and our Meet VCU authors. Our next Meet VCU authors event, in fact, will be this coming Monday at 4 p.m. with our own Dr. Faye Belgrave, Associate Dean for Equity and Community Partnerships in the College of Humanities and Sciences, and also University Professor of Psychology, who will speak about her recent book, African American Families, Research Theories and Practice. And looking ahead to November, we have two great events to kick off the Native American Heritage Month. On November the 11th at 6 p.m., we will welcome virtually one of my favorite personal heroes, Dr. Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz, whose talk is entitled Not a Nation of Immigrants: Settler Colonialism, White Supremacy, and the History of Erasure and Exclusion. And on November the 18th at 7 p.m., we will welcome both in person and virtually Choctaw writer and UGA Eidson Distinguished Professor Lian Howe, who will read from one of her recent books titled Savage Conversations. This is going to be quite an amazing event, and you're all invited in person and virtually. So I would look forward to seeing many of you and your students at these events, and many thanks to you for supporting us and supporting this project, which we'll continue to support on our website and social media. Thank you again, Ebony and Meghan, and everyone have a great weekend. This was great.
Thank you all. Y'all take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.